claimed his title as the one and only Thor. Oh, spoke too soon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a thunderous episode of the Untitled Marvel Project. Thunderously new and fresh, I might add, because today we are talking about Thor, Love and Thunder, the newest, the hottest Marvel film to come off the presses. I'm your host, Hannah Dykstra, joined, as always, by my cool co-hosts, my loving co-hosts, Abram Buhner and Tucker Hazel.
Yeah.
Now, before we get into it, I want you to subscribe to Backlog Banter. You know the drill. I want you to like this video. I want you to join the Discord. That link is in the description. Yeah, you don't want to know what happens if you don't join the Discord. It's not going to be pretty. And also, in the comments or in the Discord, let us know your thoughts on Thor: Love and Thunder. If you've seen it, you know, just give us a little opinion-y Rooney, I think they're called on the internet.
Yeah, sure, yeah, good point.
But, fellas, let's get into it. So, off the top, we'll do some non-spoiler overall thoughts here, but then we are going to go full spoilers, okay? So, just for your information, dear viewer. So, I want to start with Tucker Hazel.
That's me.
Yeah, Tucker Hazel, give me your thoughts, non-spoiler thoughts, on Thor: Love and Thunder.
I've never really liked Thor movies, and I liked Ragnarok, but then I realized that maybe it's not as good as I thought it was when we reviewed it a couple days ago, actually. So I had very low expectations for Thor: Love and Thunder. But frankly, I think it exceeded all of them. I think this is easily the best Thor movie, at least my favorite, because it feels the most personal for Thor. I think it fixes a lot of the problems that Ragnarok had in terms of being focused, having a much stronger villain, much stronger character arcs and relationships. And it's still got a lot of fun, a lot of creative visuals, some fun new characters, fun new locations. It's solid entry in the MCU, and easily my favorite Thor movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think the movie's fine. I personally don't feel like I can read a tighter narrative into this film. I think this movie wants to do so much, and it is surprisingly short. Comes in under 2 hours. But we gotta spend time with the Guardians. We gotta recount the plot of every Thor movie. We gotta try to have this relationship with Jane. We gotta make us care about her cancer situation. We gotta meet all the gods. We gotta meet Gore. We introduce a little kid, right? Oops, there's no kids in the movie. Never mind.
Yeah.
We gotta do all this stuff, right? And it feels like we never quite slow down and get there. And then we combine that with what I think is one of the least funny MCU scripts we've ever gotten.
Really?
I mean, how many times can we listen to we'll get into it, but I think that there are so many bits here that are doubled down upon that don't make sense to double down upon, especially in a film that is this tight. I would have liked to see a little bit more variety in the humor opposed to certain things that as we'll discuss in a minute. But nonetheless, I think it's pretty inspired visually. I like a lot of that. I think there's some really great moments. But I feel largely the same as I did about Ragnarok. That this movie never comes together for me past being kind of a fun 2 hours at the cinema watching Marvel stuff. It motivated me to want to go and read some Mighty Thor again, which I think is always a great sign for an MCU film. If it sort of makes me want to engage deeper with Marvel as a whole. But I don't think this film is very memorable. I don't think this is, you know, Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness for me, which I loved when we reviewed that earlier. I think this is, again, Marvel holding course. Sure. And that's what it is to me.
Yeah. Now I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I find myself, you know, falling between you two lads a little bit. No. But yeah, I mean, I would probably err on the side more of Tucker. I think I quite enjoyed this coming out of the theater. We just saw it yesterday, so these are very fresh impressions here. Still fresh. But yeah,
Still fresh. Can't make those jokes too soon. It's too soon, buddy.
Sorry. But yeah, I think this is really solid. I think Hemsworth and Portman are both fantastic here. I think they get to stretch their comedic legs a little bit in this film. Maybe more than like Hemsworth did in Ragnarok. You know, something we said is that this feels the sense of humor in this film feels a bit more unique to Taika.
Yeah.
While Ragnarok felt more like a carbon copy of Guardians.
Yeah.
And, you know, that influence is still there, I think. And the thing with the humor and basically this film overall is this. I liked it quite a bit coming out of the theater. But I felt the same way about Ragnarok. And we all know how we all felt about Ragnarok
Everyone watched the review. Yeah, it was
on a 5 years later rewatch. And this could suffer the same issue. It's certainly possible. But I think what Taika does here is he crafts a tight, you know, this is the shortest Marvel movie we've gotten in fucking years.
Yeah.
A visually interesting, as Abram and Tucker both said, and a pretty good meditation on Thor's character up until this. It is very self-reflective on, as Abrams said, we get a montage of basically Thor's entire history in the MCU. Well, only specifically in his own films, I think.
Yes. We get a little bit of Infinity War.
Yeah.
The one where he's Stormbreaker.
Yes.
They mention he gets fat.
They do
So
mention
actually,
that.
you're just wrong.
Well, okay, whatever. Well, they don't mention like Avengers 1 or 2 or anything like that.
Sure.
But it is a meditation on Thor's character arc in previous films, and I think they do respect it to a certain degree. I think that Thor and Jane's character arcs might be a little simple in this for my liking. It's not they don't get into the weeds of like Thor's sense of loss and stuff like that. There's a pretty simple patch at the end of this film that they kind of put over those sense of things. Jane has a character arc that is, of course, if you're familiar with the Mighty Thor run, is reliant on her cancer diagnosis. And they make light of that quite a bit. And the character arc might be, we'll get into it, I'm sure. But
nice quick thoughts here up on the top.
Yeah, sorry.
That's fine. Fuck it.
But ultimately, yeah, I think it's good. I mean, I got stuck on the characters a little bit, but for me, that's really the only sticking point. Some of the jokes might not land for you, but I think by and large they do. If going into this, watching it for the first time. But yeah, I enjoyed this.
Here's the thing about the humor.
Okay.
I agree. It's not
Spoilers now, by the way,
Oh,
just in case, because we've already fucking towed the line a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
yeah.
So full spoilers. Click on
line
3,
right there.
3, 2, 1. Spoilers.
Spoilers.
Hopefully
Yeah.
you're gone. But
Yeah.
Now get out of here.
The thing about the humor is, I agree that it's not the Marvel movie that I laughed the most at, like outwardly. I heard some chuckles around the theater, but there wasn't a lot of raucous, thunderous laughing gutturally around the theater. But I do think it's a very consistent tone, and I think two aspects of it. It's not as cringy as I thought that Ragnarok or Guardians of the Galaxy 2 were.
Sure.
Like, the humor did not annoy me like it did in those last two movies that we reviewed here on this channel.
Mhm.
So I was definitely more positive on the humor there. But I also think the movie strikes a better tone with its comedy because it's clearly trying to be a rom-com in elements. It's much more focused on being a comedy than most MCU movies are. Of course, there are serious scenes, and I think this one, better than Guardians 2 or Ragnarok, doesn't always undercut its serious moments with a joke.
Yeah.
But also, the rom-com humor, even if I wasn't laughing out loud, it really brought a levity to these scenes that felt very consistent. Like, it was totally like, hey, this is a rom-com between Jane Foster and Thor Odinson. And I thought that was really fresh because we've never really gotten a superhero romance of this kind in the MCU yet. So from that angle, I think humor felt very distinct.
Yeah.
I think you're right, but I think this movie just feels like it doesn't matter because of this tone.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of serious shit that happens in the movie. I mean, Gore the God Butcher has a very serious arc he's undergoing. And the narrative is basically about a bunch of kidnapped kids, right? But you never really feel that it's about a woman dying of cancer and kidnapped children, and you never really feel what's underpinning either of those, I think.
Sure.
And when I think of Taika's best work, his non-MCU work, I think there's a better, and I talked about this a little bit actually in Ragnarok also. There's a better sense of threading these serious moments with the more lighthearted ones, and I agree with you, Tucker. I like this sort of overarching tone. I think this movie is very watchable, which I appreciate. But I think you could also give it a little bit more teeth. And I also think you could not commit to some of these bits that I think are not that interesting over and over again. I mean, how many times do I have to listen to the goats yell as we're pulling the boat? Or how many times are we going to have a relationship, the thing between Stormbreaker and Mjolnir, like reflect off of Jane and Thor? I get it. But is that worth continuing the entire time? I like this idea for a second of making Mjolnir and Stormbreaker come to life. And I thought that was going to matter, like in the Gore fight. Like Thor's going to reach out because it's, Taika likes his jokes. I like your idea about embarrassing the characters.
Yes.
He's going to reach out because Gore's like, call back the axe. And Stormbreaker's mad at him, so it doesn't come back or something.
Yeah.
I think there was moments to make these more than just like these surface level bits, yelling goats, axes that aren't happy with Thor, right? But what it feels like to me instead is Taika constantly, as you're saying, makes this consistent tone, but at the cost of always moving things forward or anchoring me into the stakes of the world or these plot lines. So it just felt to me kind of surface level in a lot of respects.
Sure. I mean, you mentioned the Stormbreaker and Mjolnir sort of like rom-com-y element. I really enjoyed those jokes.
I thought it was great.
Think the first time it happens where Thor's like trying to like secretly sort of summon Mjolnir, and then Stormbreaker just kind of comes into frame behind
really
him.
fucking funny.
It's very funny. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, that happens again, of course. The screaming goats thing is. Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from with that. Yeah. I don't think it's super highlighted. Like, They
The
scream.
goats aren't around that much, frankly.
No.
But they're more than you would think.
Yeah, it happens like what 2, 3 times, 4 times maybe throughout the entire film. Well, at the beginning when they get introduced, they really
Of
lay it
course.
on.
Yeah.
But after that, it's pretty light. But yeah, I can understand where you're coming from. I think that it doesn't do as much undercutting because I think it does infuse the tone of the film a little bit more with a comedy. It's not characters having a serious, heartfelt thing, and then
That's fair.
something crashes through a window or whatever, and they go, "Whoa, what's that?" we do get an unironic. He's right behind me, isn't
Yeah,
he?
and that got a big pop out of us in the theater.
Yes.
Not because it was actually funny, but, well, I mean, it was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But because that line.
It's a meme. Yeah, it's a meme. But yeah, I by and large, like I said, in the non-spoiler thoughts, I think that the film's comedy works for me now. Could change in the next 5 years or whatever on rewatches. Could grow tired or something like that.
I like the idea that we like this film, but in a long time,
Well, yeah,
maybe it won't work.
I just think that as we've seen with Thor Ragnarok,
Sure.
it can sour over
Yeah, that's a
time,
good
and
point.
it very well could.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the reason why I don't expect myself to. And of course, I didn't expect myself to dislike Ragnarok 5 years later.
Yeah.
But is because when I saw this film was focused, I meant it. Because I do think that what focus means here for me is not having so many disparate plot elements that never really weave together. This is a very focused film in terms of each scene, for almost entirely, is leading to the next scene. We don't have Sakaar and Asgard, and things
True.
are happening over here,
True.
things are happening over here. Of course, Gore has his own area, like in the Shadow Realm or whatever.
Yeah.
We're cutting back there every few minutes to keep us connected to the stakes of the children, which I do think are reasonable stakes. It's much more personal stakes than the gods. I think that's where the stakes go. Of course, we don't really care about the kids. They're kids. Like, we're supposed to care because they're kids. Yeesh.
Yeesh.
All right, fine. Let's take another time again. We don't have a personal connection to these children because we've never met them before. Okay, one of them's Heimdall's child, but fucking
Yeah,
whatever.
Axel or Astrid. Axel.
Great joke. Guns N' Roses, I get it.
Guns N' Roses. Do you get it?
But I feel like I was expecting this movie to have so many more sequences that I felt out of place.
Yeah.
But instead, I think it felt very natural. The scenes flowing next to one another, and we weren't like jumping back and forward between a bunch of things.
I'm gonna disagree completely, but for a different reason. And here's what I'm gonna say. I think you're right about on a plot level, it's a lot more focused.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that this movie's like, we got what is ostensibly a simple problem to solve.
Yeah.
There are these kids who have been kidnapped by this guy named the God Butcher, and we gotta get him back.
Yeah.
It doesn't try to. There's no fucking
Exactly. That's what I mean.
There's no real like MacGuffins
No,
or
we're not going to fucking Edinburgh
Yeah.
to stick shit in the ground or whatever
Yeah.
we did in Dark World
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. That's not this movie, right? But I think it nonetheless feels very unfocused because it tries to do a whole hell of a lot that I don't think is really carried through. I mean, ultimately, Valkyrie gets nothing to do in the film, and I think it's worth talking about in particular the ways that this film completely fails to have any kind of meaningful representation. I think.
Yeah, that is a thing that I wanted to talk about.
We visit the whole pantheon of the gods, but that ostensibly becomes a bit part to set up a post-credit scene.
Yes.
Right. I really love the stuff between Thor and Jane. I think that stuff is really good. But maybe we could have spent a little more time with that. Or maybe we would have spent more time with Gore, because I think Gore is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I think Christian Bale knocks it out of the park. I think, for me, he takes the movie up an entire star.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I still would have wanted a little bit more with him, you know? I think the tightness of getting under 2 hours is impressive in one respect. But for a movie that wants to have so many characters and so many moving pieces, although the plot is simple, I think this movie really would have benefited from 30 more minutes.
I absolutely agree, but I also I agree actually. I don't think. Here's the thing. I don't think not having it is a hindrance for me
Sure.
in a huge regard. Yes, I would have loved more from Valkyrie. Yes, I would have loved more from Gore, but I do think he's the best Thor villain. That's for goddamn
sure.
Maybe Loki, but also
Yeah.
Thor 1.
Tuck the bars off camera.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, my bad. Alright, yeah, but he certainly could have used more.
Yeah.
But I do think that what he's in is all great, so I'm not like
Sure.
yearning for more.
Yeah. If we want to get into like specific character stuff, well, you just ended on Gore, so I suppose we can just start there for the heck of it.
Sure.
Why the hell not? Christian Bale is really great. I mean, he's clearly having some fun exploring
Yes.
Gore and just like hamming it up a little bit, being this. I think one interview he described himself as like the worst birthday entertainer ever, and you get a sense of that when he's like fucking with the kids in the cage or whatever. He's ripping the heads off of little creatures and shit like that. He's like, you liked it a second ago. Blah, blah, blah. It's that sort of villain, and it really works for the tone of the film. The design of a character. He's got like the black fucking slime in his teeth like that, and his like yellowed eyes and ashen skin and stuff like that. He looks great. He is great in the film. And he does have we open on his sort of origin story of him, in this fucking desolate desert area with his daughter who passes away, and then he stumbles into this oasis of the god that he once worshipped. And you're like, yeah, this fucking god is a piece of shit and probably deserves to die or whatever. And then that ultimately he gets corrupted by the necro sword and stuff like that, and that balloons out to being a motivation to kill all of the gods. When it comes around at the end, since we are doing full spoilers, I think that's a pretty solid like payoff to the relationship. Is Thor being like, hey man, I get that you have this like overarching mission that is ultimately because you've been corrupted by this evil force, but like I'm gonna spend my final moments with the woman that I love.
Yes,
and
great fucking moment.
Yeah, exactly. And Gore's like, damn, that's a good point, Thor. Now that I'm not being corrupted by the necrosword anymore, that's a good plan.
I think that moment is very fucking hit you over the head with what the movie wants to tell you.
Yes.
But I think that here's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
The MCU needs to hire more serious actors. And I don't like to make these sort of distinctions between fucking good actors and bad actors and fucking high art and low art. I don't give a fuck.
But Christian Bale's one of the best.
But he is, right?
Yeah.
And you can... And there's a...
And Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
And Matt Damon.
We'll talk about it.
We'll get there.
But there is a marked difference between just... Because you think about it, when I was really actually thinking about this in the theater, there are not that many actors of repute in the MCU. On the whole, a lot of
I think if you dig into things, you get to your Jeff Bridges, you get to your Samuel L. Jacksons. Like these are the top level people.
They are, but a lot of the main cast is people who really weren't that big, and then the MCU made them big, right?
Good point.
But there is a difference between watching them come into these roles and watching someone like Christian Bale immediately come in and just slaughter the entire film.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really, really cool. I think he gives a lot to scenes that wouldn't have worked for me otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Like, when he stumbles into that oasis at the beginning of the film, I think that's hokey as shit.
Mm-hmm.
But he grounds it in a really interesting way because just his face, his mannerisms, his line delivery, it all
his character
works.
in that moment is very powerful.
Yeah.
The rest of that scene, I think, is maybe the most egregious use of CGI in the film.
Mm-hmm.
He's talking to this nameless, but like just like out of nowhere god who's wearing this headdress that is clearly not a part of his body or not physical, so it's like not perfectly synced to his head. And he's saying there's fucking flower creatures, and I like the creativity of it. But I think what Gore is best at is I think he has a very grounded and realizable arc. Of course, being corrupted by the Necrosword and like some other force and trying to get to eternity, these are all crazy over the top comic book things, but it comes back to him of personal revenge, and I think a very reasonable revenge of everyone in his tribe or community dying, his daughter dying when he thought that like his faith would be the last thing to save her, and losing that to a god who's just like, no, I never fucking cared about you. There will be many more after you that will worship me. And then I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that sort of a theme of this movie that's not fully played into that is very interesting nonetheless is the role that these god creatures play in the MCU, each of them having their own communities and they having the pantheon in Omnipotent City, which I think is not only very visually interesting, very interesting little lore concept. Like we're getting gods from every fucking pantheon.
We're getting like a dumpling god.
That was
I think.
Weird.
Yeah,
that was weird. But that was a weird.
A little troll god, just a head and toes.
That one was funny. But I think that that theme of God's roles and the inspirations that they have, and that fact that some gods are helpful and some gods don't care about their believers, I think that puts Thor in a very interesting place and connects this in a way that felt a lot more personal than the Grandmaster of Zakar, which had nothing to do with Asgard. Like the roles of gods and Asgard and Asgard's role in this god community, I think is all very interesting, and I think it pushes Thor in a very personal way to be a more inspiring person as a god. When you're seeing him give these speeches, he's not very good at the beginning, but then he's given a good speech near the end to these kids, and he's given a good speech to Jane as she's about to not go with him on
Yeah.
that final mission. Like he learns a lot more to be that he can be inspiring, and he does have this ability in him that he has in previous films. Because I think this film's really for Thor is about his identity crisis.
Yes.
And I think that because of the MCU, I think it's heightened by this. Because what's his identity? You know, serious. Oh, he's in the Avengers. Oh, he's down here. Oh, now he's Fat Thor. Now he's Ragnarok. And this film, I think, recognizes that all of this canonically is because Thor doesn't know who he is as a person, and it takes like outside inspiration and recognizing that he's not been feeling love and pushing people away to like come to realize himself. And now I really feel like the Thor that we end with here, he's got this great costume on, he's learning to be inspiring, he's leaned into his own sense of humor, is a much more distinct and like realized Thor than we've ever had before.
I think, like I said up top, this film does reflect a lot upon the losses that Thor has had over the course of the MCU and stuff like that. And I think that where his character ends here and where it goes in the film and where it ends ultimately is a interpolation of that for sure. You know, like Tucker said, the loss of the identity crisis is because of that continued loss. Is he even a god of Asgard anymore? If Asgard doesn't exist, if the royal family of Asgard doesn't exist, his family, if that's all gone, what is he essentially?
Exactly.
And I think that comes around in him, you know, making his own family, of course, with eternity, love, singularity,
We
whatever
don't know the character's name.
Chris Hemsworth's actual daughter plays the child at the end of this. So yeah, I mean, that's first of all, that's just a cool little thing, because I think they do have some real like father-daughter chemistry, which actually comes through at the end there. But if we're talking about Thor's character, I think it's pretty good. If not cheapened. I mean, like I said, I think the whole thing of like he makes his own family is just like a patch on that loss where he doesn't maybe really fully come to terms with it, and he's just like, I'm going to have a new family now. So I that's just my thoughts on it, at least.
I don't see any character growth in this movie at all, frankly. Okay. And I'm curious to discuss this because I like your idea, Tucker, about because I love that I'm going to put theme in quotes for a second because I want to discuss why I don't think it's really a theme of the movie at all. But this. I'm going to call it an observation.
Okay.
This observation that gods are selfish or don't help their people.
Yeah.
But I think it's only an observation because where does that idea really go? I think you're right that you can read into the film that Thor takes away stuff from that, but you really never have to see him reconcile with it. There's never a scene where it's like, oh, fuck, damn, these kids, oh, I don't want to have to deal with these Asgard kids, right? It's never about that. He's always like, damn, I got to protect my people, I got to help my people. Sure. And Thor has never been anything if not dedicated to rescuing Asgard. So we've got to save Asgard. I got to protect my people, got to protect my people, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's an interesting idea, but I don't think the film really does anything with it. And I also think, how many times are we going to watch Thor deal with loss? Every single fucking Thor movie is about him dealing with loss, right? And I agree that by the end, I don't actually see it as much of a patch as you do. I like this idea that finally Thor is going to move forwards, right?
Sure.
But ultimately, the idea that, oh, I got my heart broken and now I can't keep anybody close is not an interesting character arc at all. I've seen that a million times. And so what I think I'm coming to reconcile a little bit is maybe we need to view some of these movies as just characters we know going on a new adventure episodically, right?
A classic Thor adventure in many ways.
And basically, that's what frankly, that's what I feel it is, because a lot of this thematic ground, I think, is either not really explored because there's not a lot of time, or we've done it before. But I don't necessarily hold that against the film. I just don't view it as the positive you guys do, I suppose. I just see it as, yeah, we're continuing this idea of loss again, or we're hinting at this idea about the gods, but the gods who really are the shitheads we see for one scene and we move on from. Maybe if we gotten more sequences of Gore killing gods, I would have cared more. First, would have built up his mystique a little bit more. Because frankly, I don't think Gore ever feels that powerful. Really, his shadow monsters do. Yeah. But he's either fucking scooting away from Thor or pulling some kind of hijinks heist, right? Yeah. But if we saw him, because Sif, another character, completely shoehorned into the movie just to say shit, he's in there. And the big fucking ice dino from the comics. If we saw him kill those two,
I feel like there's a scene that's missing there.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's where the runtime feels too scant for me. And then maybe that develops the idea a little bit more of, oh fuck, this big ice dinosaur didn't care about his people. Yeah. I'm getting that idea a little bit more, but instead I'm getting suggestion of it, right? I'm getting suggestion that Thor lost somebody. I'm like, he's been losing people since 2011 or whatever.
Yeah, sure, fair enough.
So it's a non-starter for me, but it's also really a non-issue, I guess, because I didn't come into the movie looking for this sort of characterization.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason that I'm able to read into it is because I do think this movie does a better job at recognizing Thor's ups and downs of the past.
Sure.
Yes, this is something that we've seen for mostly in other films. I don't think I mean, I guess Tony Stark is pushing people away and needs to learn. Like, whatever.
I'm talking about films on a whole.
Sure.
Yeah.
God, I've seen a number of those. Let me check my watch. But because this film does do its recaps, and I think its recaps are how I realize this film recognizes that Thor needs an identity. He needs an identity.
Sure.
He's talking about this in multiple sequences. The scene with Star-Lord, the scene where he talks to Jane about what Star-Lord said, these sort of things, and on top of those sequences, which I do think flesh out his personality a lot more and allow him to feel more at home in this rom-com comedy of Korg narrating it and going like, he lost his dad, he lost his mom, he lost his brother, he lost his brother, he lost his brother, he lost this guy, he lost this guy, and it feels funny, but it feels like a self-aware comedy of we've got all these moments and people have been shitting on the fact that we killed
Loki 3 times.
We killed Loki 3 times. We killed the Warriors 3 in 5 seconds. Okay, that's fine. Like, that was a joke. That was funny. We can move on from this, but recognize that it has impacted Thor. And then the Jane stuff, I think, is maybe stronger than the Lost stuff in this in terms of him finding something that he loves and accepting someone to be close to him and recognizing that he has harbored this loss of Jane's relationship. And watching that rom-com sequence edited together of what their relationship was like between, I guess, the end of Dark World, maybe before he left at the end of Age of Ultron. It's unclear, but it doesn't really matter. Like, in the span of 6 years, he came back to Asgard. He was going off. He was doing adventures, and it tells this interesting story of what it would be like to date a superhero who's always just jumping off. Oh, I got Nick Fury. I got Heimdall calling me. He's using an excuse to leave the thing. He's like, Heimdall, summon me on the Bifrost. And they're doing these things together. And Mjolnir's like a third partner in their relationship. I think that's like maybe the strongest part of identity of this film. And it sets up really compellingly, easily the best chemistry that Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman have had in the franchise.
Oh,
like,
100%.
Like, leagues better than their previous relationship. And also sets up Jane really well.
Yeah. If we want to talk about Jane a little bit, I think, obviously, bringing Natalie Portman back for the Mighty Thor sort of storyline here is really cool. I really enjoy them, them folding that storyline in here. I haven't read it. These two knuckleheads have. Yeah. So I couldn't really speak to if they do the storyline justice in this film.
It has basically nothing to do with the storyline from the comics, but I don't think that's a problem. It's about incorporating the concept of Jane Foster, her cancer, becoming Thor, the clash between Odin's son and Jane Foster for the identity of Thor. That, I think, is all handled very well here. Nothing to do with the story. There's no Odin pushing back at her. They're not throwing Mjolnir into the sun at the end of this moment. I mean, to a certain degree, but I think that her inclusion here and meshing that with the Gore the God Butcher story is why this movie feels so focused, because I feel like the storylines support each other very well in terms of the identity of Jane and the identity of Gore. And at the end, when she realizes, I mean, they both have a weapon that's either corrupting them or preventing them from death, and they're both on the edge of death. Like, there's a really interesting cinematic parallels here that I think make both these characters very interesting.
I've got many things to say about what you guys said. Okay. First of all, I've always thought Mighty Thor is a really cool character.
Yeah.
And to me, I think I've said this on the Untitled Chapter project at some point in time. To me, the MCU movies are best when they sort of make you synergize with Marvel as a whole, right? So it's been many years since I've read that Jason Aaron run, and this film makes me want to go back and finish it, because I think I only read like the first trade paperback or whatever. Yeah. And that's, to me, a sign of well-placed world building. If you're making me interested in your world, you're doing something right. At the same time, I think that the movie does have a problem with how much ground it retreads. I like that rom-com montage, but again, it comes back to, you're putting a superhero flavor on a storyline we've seen a million times before. Sure. The guy is working too hard and the work pushes him apart, right? And seeing it filtered through the eyes of fucking superhero and astrophysicist, that's cool to me. But when so much of the movie is dealing with the past and retreading and trying to fill in these little gaps and doing montages, I feel like we're wasting time that we could spend fleshing out this relationship more, because ultimately, I like this sort of, she shows up and is like, oh, fuck, she's back. She's doing better than me, right? Yeah. She can't be doing better than me. Yeah. I like that, but then it largely flips on a dime and on the fucking boat, and it's like, hey, actually, I love you, I have cancer. I laughed out loud at that. I don't know if it was a joke or not. I thought that was really funny. But then all of a sudden, we're right back into the romance, right? And that's fine. And I like the scene in the hospital, but we could have had a couple less montages and spent a little bit more time with this.
So, yeah.
You know what I mean? Because ultimately, it's not your responsibility to tell people what happened in the last 4 Thor movies, or the last 3 Thor movies. Because even if you just got 10 more minutes of screen time, free this up, keep the montage about the stuff in between, even though I don't think it's super original. It's kind of needed, right?
Yeah.
But you don't need to tell me what happened in Thor 1, 2, and 3.
But that's also like 25 seconds of screen time.
Sure, but it sort of speaks to me about the fact that I feel that this movie misuses the time it has. It goes back to the Guardians also. Why in the fuck are the Guardians here?
Yeah.
I wish that... I love the Guardians, love them, one of my favorite Marvel IP, but they're here for so little. And to set up a very basic thematic idea of you gotta hold the people you love close, right? Don't recap so much. Don't try to throw in the Guardians. Shift this time to the Jane stuff, which I think is really interesting, but just needs a little bit more time.
Well, here's the thing. I disagree with a lot of that, because I think that what they've done here with some of these sequences works for this movie's goal a lot better than maybe you're able to read into it. Because the Guardians, I agree, underutilized, but I think personally perfectly utilized. I was worried they were going to be here the entire movie. That was going to bloat the cast of characters.
Yeah.
We were going to have to deal with more character arcs.
Sure.
I think the fact that Thor has been... we see him doing these adventures with the Guardians, which is really funny. It gives a great connection between the two groups in Thor. His role as sort of competing captains with Star-Lord, I think, is great. It shows that, like, his identity crisis still is ongoing, but he wants to be a savior to people, and he shows up when he's needed. And also, I think that the sequence of him like destroying the temple and these aliens be like, what the fuck, bro? Like, that I think is a good example of like the role of gods in the MCU. Or, like these fuck, well, what are we gonna do now? But also the fact that they are not utilized a lot, I think, saves the movie from feeling way too bloated. I think they're used for the perfect amount. We'll see if like how that plays into Guardians 3, if at all. But I was gonna talk about the thing about recapping. Their relationship, I think, is necessary because the romance of this film is predicated on the fact that we want to connect to these characters. We want to believe that they want to be together. Sure. I would not believe that if I had not seen what their relationship was like in this film, because they had no chemistry before this. We did not see their relationship before this. Yeah. They shared a couple scenes in Thor 1 and 2. That is literally it. So recapping that, placing it in the framework of they haven't seen each other in a while, and they still harboring feelings for each other. They're like both looking at each other out of the corner of their eye. It's a sort of, obviously it's not a will they won't they, because we know they will. Yeah. But I found that to be a compelling dynamic that we've seen before in other movies, but we certainly have not seen in the MCU, because we've never had this time gap. We've never had the possibility of this relationship where Thor's had all these adventures. She has done all of this. Things have changed so drastically between the last time they met, and seeing that filtered through superhero antics and to these characters that I do care about felt very purposeful to me.
I think what I would say to that point in particular is that if I didn't care before, I'm not going to care after a minute-long montage.
Okay.
You know? And at the same time, it's like, the superhero stuff does boil down to, oh my god, I gotta go to work. Sorry, I can't be on the date right now, right? It's never, oh fuck, I'm trying to work on my science stuff, and Mjolnir flies through one wall of my house and out the other wall of the house, right? It's, oh god, we're sitting down for dinner, but Nick Fury's calling, or oh, I gotta go fly away, right, or do something. It's the most basic idea of superhero stuff get in the way of a relationship possible. And so but it's still cute. You're right, it's cute. I like seeing Thor in a hot dog costume. I like they're fucking watching
the rollerblading or whatever.
Yeah, they're watching a movie.
All the brief little montage things are very good, like Taika Waititi humor stuff. Like Thor gets scared watching a horror movie and like holds up Mjolnir in front of him. It's very good stuff.
So fun.
It's cute stuff, but it's like, give me more, because that's not enough to sell me, right? I think what sells me more is the fact that they just blatantly have better chemistry in general in the actual scenes of the film.
No, absolutely.
And I just wish we could have gotten more than that. And I still just think that the Guardian stuff, I get what you're saying, but you can do that in a way that feels less like, let's drag and drop Guardians in here for 5 minutes of the movie, take them out. The Guardians basically totally superfluous. They barely even get any lines. They basically have no personality. They basically do nothing. Yeah. It could have just been Korg and Thor having an adventure that more developed that relationship, because Korg is also fucking pointless in this movie too. You know what I mean?
But Abram, you misunderstand that at the end of Endgame, with Thor left with the Guardians, so we need to have the Guardians in this. So sorry to sink your whole ship there. Sure. But you fellas just went on it for
Yeah.
a little bit, so I want to give my thoughts on Jane Foster
If you have to.
and the Thor relationship a little bit. I think the relationship is better. You guys nailed it on the head. It is. They have way better chemistry than they've ever had previously in the MCU. I think the whole break. I think it's good to to flesh out the reason for the breakup, because
Yes.
in Age of Ultron, it's just like, we broke up, or we're I don't even know if they say that. They're just like, oh, Jane's busy or whatever.
Yeah.
And they
Yes.
never address it after that.
Yeah, in Ragnarok, a woman comes up to him on the street and is like, "Sorry to see Jane left you," and he's like, "Hey, she didn't leave me."
Yeah, we've gotten
And then in Endgame, he's like, "Jane, an old flame of mine."
we've gotten near zero explanation
Right.
as to what happened here, and
Yeah.
it's largely just because Natalie Portman didn't want to be in the movies
Yes.
anymore.
Yes.
So
This is a good way to come back from like real world shenanigans that happened in the MCU.
Yeah, for sure. So I like the montages. I think they're cute. But if we want to get into the actual implementation of Jane in the narrative,
Yeah.
I think that there might be a few too many cancer jokes in
Sure.
this film. Like, I want them to take this a little bit more seriously. Like the dialysis scene where Darcy Lewis shows up, Kat Dennings back,
Yeah.
everybody, where she's like, Jane, it's stage 4 cancer. She's like, out of how many stages? But
Yeah.
Because she wouldn't know.
no, she's an astrophysicist. Why would she know? But like, or the other thing would be,
If you can't remember, it's fine.
okay. Well, the other thing would be on the scene on the ship, like
Yes.
Abrams said, where she's like, Thor's like, hey, I think I still have feelings for you, or he's like fumbling his way through to say that,
Yeah.
and Jane's response is, I have cancer.
I actually think that one works better though, because it's like she's forced to confront the sort of long-term
Yes.
commitment,
Exactly.
but she's about to die. I just think it's funny. I think that juxtaposition is really funny.
Sure.
Whether it's supposed to be or not is another question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I agree with you about how many stages thing there is. And to me, Tanner, it comes back to this idea that the movie is way more serious than it betrays. The idea that these kids are sitting in the mouth of some kind of big spirit shadow creature,
Mm-hmm.
and Thor shows up the first time and like kind of laughs at him,
Mm-hmm.
is really weird to me. The fact that the cancer stuff is played so flippantly most of the time deflates a lot of the sort of stakes of her dropping
And
Mjolnir.
it tries
losing
to have
power.
it both ways, like with see when she
Yes.
drops the hammer and she's visibly looking worse and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But my other thing is, the scene in the hospital, which I really enjoy, is
Good scene.
Good scene. But she is like on knocking on death's door essentially.
Yeah.
But she's still doing like regular Jane Foster in this movie shtick.
Sure.
Yeah, I would maybe if she was Natalie Portman's a good actress. She can be sickly and still portray this like, I have to go do this. I have to help you. But she can seem physically weaker because she should be. She's nearly dying of cancer.
Yeah.
It should also be a very much deeply emotional moment because we see the Elaine Foster stuff,
Mhm.
that parallel. And I get, like, it motivates you gotta fucking be there for the people you
Mhm.
love or something. I don't really remember. But it's like, there needed to be more time for contemplation within. Because Jane, she's not a side character. This is her narrative. This is her final chapter of life,
Yeah.
right? We go from her being basically unimportant
Mhm.
to being a fucking world-renowned astrophysicist who's about to die.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we don't get enough time, I think, to settle with that.
Yeah, no, and I think that is the function of the truncated runtime.
Yes.
Because I feel like most of the runtime in this movie, if it was extended, would have absolutely been given to her. Because I do think that she's maybe not the most important aspect of this movie, because I still do think it is surprisingly a lot of Thor Odinson's story.
Yeah.
But in terms of how she's incorporated into the story and their two stories intersect with the romance, I think it is handled very well. As I said, I found the romance very compelling, but I do think that watching her as a superhero and sort of hiding this darker secret of that she's dying of cancer, yes, they don't play into her like dropping the hammer and being sick again. Like, that's not even revealed until like 3/4 of the way through the movie, where the doctor's like, yeah, I know, her, like, something's getting in the way of her body fighting the cancer. And Thor has to explain to her that that her body can't fight because she's expending all her energy on being a superhero. That is why the comics are so compelling, and I think it is a very compelling aspect of this story. You do feel like there's this ticking clock on her. If she does pick up this hammer, keep picking up this hammer, it is killing her. That, I think, has like an inherent emotional weight to not seeing this character die and not seeing their romance, which is compelling, which is blooming, come to an end. And I think that it is, maybe on the nose and maybe kind of expected, but seeing her sacrifice herself, like the ultimate hero sacrifice of the man that I love and all these children and frankly the fate of the universe and all these gods and all these lives are on the line if I don't pick up this hammer one more time and knowingly sacrifice my life. I think that sequence is handled a little bit weird because she comes in and she says, "I am the mighty Thor." Really fucking on the nose. Did not like that. But then when she says, "I'm Dr. Jane Foster," she
barely better.
I liked it significantly better. But then the way that she sacrificed herself to specifically stop Gore with the Necro Sword by using the coolest ability she has in this, which Mjolnir is still in pieces, and it can break into pieces and control the pieces.
So cool.
Consume the pieces of the Necro Sword and then smash it on the ground with like the fucking power of the sun or whatever, the power of Thor, to blow it up.
Sure.
That, I think, is a really powerful sacrifice moment that I think is ended with the most serious moment in this film that I think is the most emotional, which is Thor realizing that he has a choice in this moment to either, try to talk sense into the villain or go back and spend a moment with the woman he loves. And I think that is the culmination of all of the character arcs, which maybe you don't see as strongly as I do, but I think that moment brings together the romance, Jane's sacrifice, Thor's quest for love, and it's a very serious scene that is not undercut by a joke at all.
Yeah, I like the sacrifice. I don't care, I think, as much as you do. Just because again, it comes back to I wish we had more time to develop these things. Again, a 2.5 hour cut of this film, I think, for me would be very good. Yeah. Whereas now I just feel middling because I feel like I have to do a lot of extrapolation to get where you are, opposed to just looking and seeing it for me as a viewer, saying, okay, that scene to this scene to this scene to this scene, and I'm there with you. Sure. That's why I just wish I had a little bit more screen time to really buy into that. The last thing I majorly want to talk about, though, is the action.
Hold on. There's actually still one thing I want to talk about for Jane.
If you have to.
If you must.
It is the element of her being a new superhero. I think is really fun. It's really fun. It's one of the most interesting elements of this movie on a story level. But, like, her not quite knowing what a catchphrase is like, oh, this is my first bad guy, and Thor kind of having to teach her. Of course, she's very good at the comments, so like that's not a problem. But the dynamic of like the guy who's been a superhero for thousands of years and her on her first time, she doesn't really know what she's doing. I think that's played for a really good job.
I don't think it is at all.
Oh,
my feeling is like the first time we see her, she's fucking up everybody. Yeah, and she can fight Gore when Thor can't. And I'm not here to say, oh, she's gonna learn. She can't be Thor right away. But it's
she's a real Jane Sue, if you will.
But my feeling,
Mary Jane.
Oh, that's good.
The catchphrase joke is fine, but it's like, I guess she's a new superhero, but you wouldn't know it. Like, you never really get moments where she's like, oh my god, and I can't believe I just flew, or I can't believe I did X or Y or whatever. And some of the most fun moments of like Superman stories is seeing him fly for the first time and get that elation of learning these powers. But we never get any of that.
Yeah, that's true.
We cut from fucking pieces of Mjolnir shaken to next time we see her, she's already friends with Valkyrie. She's already fucking stuff up.
It is unclear how much time passes between her arriving in New Asgard to Thor arriving in New Asgard and her being Thor. Because Valkyrie's like, oh, you're gonna love this. You're gonna love the new guy or whatever.
And the other thing is, again, if you want to develop their relationship more, instead of her just being able to do all the thunder powers, what if there's a scene of Thor being like, hey, so Jean, you're Thor now. Watch this. And they bond over learning how to use the electricity powers.
No, that's absolutely true. And I think, again, that's the cut runtime. Yeah. That is, you can feel those scenes. You know canonically they're in there somewhere, but we don't get to see them.
Yeah, and that makes the movie a lot worse, in my opinion.
Sure.
Okay.
But speaking of making the movie worse.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I think the action in this movie fucking sucks.
Really?
I think the movie, first of all, I think it's a visual issue. I think the black and white stuff is terrible.
Okay.
Hard disagree.
I think the movie's not lit for black and white. It's very clear that they just desaturated the entire film panel or the film screen, and it just is. It's like heavy shadows on the front of the characters, and we're whipping around, we're hitting shit, we're fighting the shadow monsters in those towns, and it's just black and like yellowish. I think that the movie looks bad in the action, and I don't think it's memorable. There are the moments of throwing Mjolnir and he splits apart, and that's cool, and you get like one shot of fucking Stormbreaker flying around. But when you think about visually inspired MCU action, I don't think that's here at all. I think it's very basic. Hit the guys, finish the scene like fighting Zeus. Zeus's faceless yellow paladins show up, and we're punching them and we're kicking them, and then we're done.
Well, I think the gold blood sort of like reveling in that is sort of fun. Like the glittery gold blood, Valkyrie's like spinning around like with it all over her arms and shit like that.
I guess so. I just have a hard time thinking of any of these they've been anywhere near a top MCU action sequence.
Sure,
I agree that they're not top MCU action sequences, but I think they're very consistent. I heavily disagree about the black and white. And I do think you're wrong. I think it is lit for black and white. I think it is supposed to be. Like, I don't think they just desaturate it, because this is very clearly intentional of how stark the shadows are and where shadows are or aren't and what the way things are lit. And I think that makes that visually interesting in a way that, yes, we've never seen a black and white scene in a Marvel movie before, but they don't. Like they fully commit to it. It is only like light reds and blues coming from like the light of Mjolnir that's pushing back against this shadow, and we get these large scale shots of like the shadow monsters coming over the edge of this really small planet, and there's all this debris floating in the background. And when Gore pulls his sword across, there's debris floating like really slowly off the ground. Like that action sequence isn't top tier for me, but I think it is very visually inspired. So in that department, I completely disagree.
I just wish that color was used more deliberately, because there's this idea of bringing color back, right? Jane even says
bring the rainbow.
Yeah. So I thought what we were gonna get was a huge fucking heavy metal action sequence here, because it's a Guns N' Roses movie for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I thought we are gonna be clashing, and there was gonna be like Technicolor color flying off the weapons, and there's gonna be a reason. But instead it becomes we're going to the Shadow Realm. It's in black and white, and except for when there's flashes of like kind of desaturated blue or red. And to me, that just it's like okay, it's fine. It's a gimmick, and to me, it's not a visually interesting gimmick, because I feel like a lot gets lost in those sequences.
What's interesting to me about the black and white thing for me is I think it's visually interesting. That's just how I feel about it. But on a large level, I wonder if Taika Waititi is on. He seems like a guy who's on Twitter. I think he's on Twitter. But I mean, like on Twitter. And he saw people being like, the MCU movies don't have any color, yada yada yada. So I think maybe this might be him having a little fun with that.
Could be,
because there's literally I think Jane says a line like, "Where'd all the color go?"
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a thought that I had.
Sure.
But it doesn't really mean anything ultimately. Yeah. Action scenes as a whole, I agree with you, Abram. They're not top tier by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think there's anything. Comparing this to Ragnarok, I don't think there's even anything on the level of like the opening battle or the Bifrost battle at the end,
or the Hulk battle,
or the Hulk battle.
No,
exactly.
Absolutely, they're not on that level.
I also leaned over to Tanner and said Taika Waititi has one wide shot, because how many times do we see Thor jump and fucking pull Stormbreaker back? And it's a cool shot, but we know that he has a talent for framing interesting scenes, and we don't get those.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe my favorite one of the whole thing, outside of like the visual interest of the black and white sort of setting, is that opening one on the alien planet with the Guardians. Where Thor is just like doing weird Saturday morning cartoony moves on things.
I think that's not the most visually interesting, because I like the black and white, but that is the fight of this, because it shows his personality very clearly. He's showing off.
He's doing like the JCVD splits and stuff like that. Yeah. He is zooming all the way up on through this tower as like a ball of lightning or whatever. Or even like the thing at the very beginning when he like hops on his hammer like a fucking broomstick. Yeah. It is just silly. That is like 100% unadulterated Taika Waititi silliness.
I like that scene. I like that scene.
But I think the interesting thing is the action sequences are relatively sparse in this movie. Yeah. I guess we get like 4 big ones.
You get the ones you need. You get the intro. You get the end of the second act. You get the fucking climax.
Well, and the one in Omnipotent City.
Yeah.
But I don't think they drag on. I think that's the thing. These action sequences don't bother me, because I think they show the characters' personalities very well. I think they are very visually distinct in terms of the 4 that we have. They're all in different locations. They all have different concepts. The last one with the kids having the items imbued with the power of Thor.
That's cute.
It's corny as all fuck, but I think that it is like an extrapolation of the theme that I was saying earlier of Thor being inspiring and sharing his power with others. Like each of them feel very distinct. They don't drag on, and we're back into what I think matters, which is learning about these characters, is seeing their dynamic grow, having them go to Omnipotent City, learning about these gods, spending a little time with Thor, spending a little time back in New Asgard, which is a really interesting aspect of this film that I think is utilized just enough. I would like to have learned more about it, but seeing New Asgard has sort of been taken over by capitalism, and it's sort of this mishmash
like a tourist trap now.
Of tourism and like actual culture, and how they've like built this mythology around Asgard and its connection to Earth. And so you've got where Mjolnir landed on the ground with the pieces after Hela broke it. That is, they can't move them, so they just put a bubble over it. And it's a tourist attraction now, and they're doing the play from when Odin died. Like, I think each of these elements creates a really unique, like, we've never seen anything like this in media, frankly, of like alien culture being infused in this one town that's a tourist attraction. Like, all that isn't played into a lot, but I think just enough for me to like love this locale. And this feels to me like this is what Thor is. It's the mythology of Asgard that we saw in those first two movies that was really Shakespearean, kind of dry, kind of boring. But now it's been like
clashing with humanity, as we understand in the MCU,
and been infused with the humor and life of what we know the MCU's humanity to be.
Personally, Tucker, I think they should have made the town in District 9 a tourist trap.
Sure. Tucker, I like what you're saying, but I didn't feel any of that. It looks to me like a coastal town, and they've got a weird Thanos ice cream store, and they got like a place that they gather, and it's a tourist thing. Yeah. But I didn't feel this idea of like cultural conflict at all, because we're basically never there. Valkyrie is like the mayor of the town, but we spend no time with Valkyrie.
She's the king.
She's the king. Well, I didn't even realize that, frankly. I think that's...
They say it like 5 times.
I think it's a really underserved element of the film.
And of course, she finds her queen at the end of this film. We'll get to it in a second. No, hey, bro, hang on, Abram. Stand down, Abram. Stand down. I just wanted to say the new Asgard thing provides one of my favorite jokes of the entire film, which is some nondescript side character that we see for half a second. Someone says, "Half our army is dead. We can't go after these people." And then some lady says, "Half our army is always dead." Just more playing on the history of Thor and Thor killed all of Asgard, or half of Asgard, and then he killed half of Asgard again on the ship when they were traveling over.
Thanos,
it's just
Thor.
Oh, sorry, Thanos. Sorry. TH names, I can hardly differentiate them.
Yeah, hardly know her.
I hardly
Thor, hardly know her.
Hardly know her. Abram,
yeah,
I'm letting you loose. I'm taking the reins off.
I think that Marvel's LGBT representation is becoming despicable.
Yeah.
I think it's unacceptable. I think it's unacceptable that every time we see representation, sexual representation, it is in sequences that can be easily struck from the film or are completely nondescript. It happened in Lightyear. I think Lightyear is ridiculous. You can literally, someone posted on Twitter, you can see where you can cut that scene out of the movie if you need to. And with this one, first of all, they completely, and my friend said this, they completely queerbait Valkyrie.
For sure. 100%.
Absolutely not even in the movie.
Yeah.
Korg.
Well, but she kisses that lady's hand, Abram.
My bad.
Yeah.
And then we also get Korg has a relationship with Dwayne, which is a good joke. That made me laugh. But it's got to be rock people, and
it can't be humans.
It can't be humans, and the
line, and we can't take it seriously.
We can't take it seriously, and if the majority of the relationship has to be explained by a talking head who shows nothing, he's got to be a talking head strapped to the wall. I think it's ridiculous. I think this is a persistent issue with Disney as a whole, and I think it's getting ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's all. That's as
I mean, as it is. Right before this movie came, like the day that this movie came out, there was a clip at their premiere where somebody asked, I think it was Natalie Portman, how gay is this movie? She's like, this movie is gay.
It's not.
It's not.
Well, I think that's interesting. I think in terms of how flippant the movie is with sexuality, way more open than anything we've seen from Disney before. In terms of discussing the fact that Valkyrie swings both ways, as she said. We're on the same team. Of course, these are veiled references to sexuality,
very veiled.
But then not veiled references. Your girlfriend died in battle. You're looking for another woman to fill her place. My dad and his dad, or my two dads had a relationship. I found my love with another man. Of course, aliens. Of course, only male species. It is filtered through these things. But I think in terms of how open it is with talking about these things, I hear the thing. Yes, they can be cut, but they don't cut them. They didn't do it with Eternal. They didn't do it with Lightyear.
They don't cut them here.
No, they don't show them in these other countries. Like Saudi Arabia didn't get Eternals or Lightyear because they refused to cut them. Of course, these aren't the representations they should have.
That's the bare minimum.
I know, I understand that, but the fact that they are, it is baby steps. It should not take this long. But I do think that this direction is good, and I can see them as they sort of like ease the MCU into having these things, having Valkyrie have a wife in the future or something like that. That should have happened in this movie. I don't think it shouldn't have, but I do think what is here is better than I expected. I mean, frankly, when people say this movie is gay, okay, no, like it's not as queer as people would say, but I think it is more than I expected because people are saying no, it's not at all, which I don't think is true.
I mean, it's a different conversation, but I think films like this have a responsibility to lead culture in progress, especially with a very progressive director like Taika Waititi, and it's really disappointing to me to see them continue to take baby steps when this is the biggest fucking media franchise in the world, and Disney can take a hit. And Disney and they did.
It was called Eternals,
right? But I think, in my opinion, and again, this is a different conversation, but I think Disney has a responsibility to do this, and I think that they just failed again, and they marketed this movie not nearly entirely, but largely on the premise of Valkyrie finding her queen and X and Y, and didn't do any of it.
Yeah, it is disappointing on that front,
Yeah.
especially from how heavily they were hinting at things and just saying these things and stuff like that. So, but okay, yeah. What else are we going to talk? Just cut this out. Essentially, what else do we want to talk about?
I think I'm basically done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, should we talk about like the post-credit scenes since we are like doing this right after it comes out? We do get some post-credit scenes, of course. Believe it or not, they do have post-credit scenes on this MCU film. To that end, I like Russell Crowe as Zeus. He's doing a really weird accent, and he's just stupidly cartoony.
Yeah.
He's lifting up his little skirt as he's like walking in the steps.
The
He doesn't need to.
The fucking scene of him throwing his thunderbolt and catching it in different ways and it blowing up into fireworks.
Yeah.
And like, ooh, it's like, oh, thunderbolt!
Oh.
I thought that was fucking hilarious.
Yeah, I liked him a lot. That joke to him was going. I was like, "Fuck, this joke's going on too long." And then when he catches it, finally goes, "No." They got a laugh on me.
No!
It was a much better constructed scene than I thought. But again, I think the killing obviously is fast, but the killing Zeus thing is really weird. It's like, oh, we killed Zeus. Don't ever talk about it again. You know what I mean?
And that leads into the post-credit scene.
Sure.
I thought they were going to leave Zeus dead, and that was going to motivate Hercules to be like, "You killed my dad. What the fuck, Thor?"
Yeah.
But no, Zeus is alive, but they're still going to do that as like, he embarrassed the gods, which I guess is still a solid, sort of motivation for Hercules. Like, you embarrassed the gods. How dare you embarrass the gods? How dare you?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Jared Leto over here.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about all that. I think that it will be more interesting once we've seen where the storyline is going. I did not expect any of this. Frankly, I didn't really expect there to be a setup for another adventurous Thor, but I think what we have set up here is very compelling. I like the idea that the gods, namely Zeus, are so up their own ass that if someone embarrasses them or goes against their will, they're going to hunt them down.
Yeah.
And this idea of exploring more of what the pantheon of gods and Omnipotent City and Zeus and all these other gods are going to do in this next movie, that is obviously going to be the focus. I like the idea that Zeus is... He, of course, I think, of course, he doesn't die. Yes, it's a scene where they think they killed him, but, like, only the Necrosword can kill them.
Fair point.
So, it doesn't... Like, I didn't think that was a cheap out, and also the fact that Zeus died, and his only response is, like, I'm gonna hunt you. I'm gonna send my son to hunt you down.
Yeah.
Like, it's corny, it's over the top, but I think it works for, like, the ridiculousness of this character that Russell Crowe is portraying, and I'm very excited to see, the gods chasing down Thor as he's trying to be a dad and teach his daughter how to be a superhero because she has the powers of eternity. Like, this is leaning into comic book bullshit 1000%. And Taika Waititi's style is leaning 1000% into comedy. And I think that, like, a super, like, high concept comedy with these characters that are really wacky and colorful is going to be really fun. And I think that's what this sets up. Absolutely.
I agree with you completely. Grace Randolph said something in a video before the film came out. It was like, this is a great setup for Thor 5.
Yeah.
And the Thor 5 looks more interesting than the Thor 4. And frankly, I agree with you because I love what you're saying. I really like the Thor as a dad. It's a very short sequence, but I think it's a lot of fun. It reminds me almost of the scene I love from No Time to Die with Bond having a child.
Yeah.
Ostensibly. And this is obviously a different tone of that, but I like what we're setting up in Tucker. I agree. This is almost like John Wick idea of fucking mess with the Continental, all the guys coming at you. And to me, that feels like...
But that would make this John Wick 2, though. Yikes.
A great point. But no, I like that. I think that a lot of this movie, it's a casualty of still Taika Waititi having to put his Thor into motion, right?
Sure.
Still got to wrap up the fucking loss and the Infinity War and the Avengers and the Guardians and everything. But I think when we fully unchain him, as you're saying in the next film, that's to me when I'm probably like, okay, I'm on board fully.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about all this, and I think Ragnarok, as we said, is a weird symptom of Taika Waititi sort of like hard cutting into this is my Thor now, and it's not like what you saw before. I like how through Ragnarok, which again we didn't really like, but you can feel the transition, and now this, and then whatever comes next, it's not. There is a progression here, and you can see him becoming looser and wearing the jacket in this movie as opposed to and having a more colorful costume, and his identity crisis finally being solved, and like now we're gonna get like a full 5-movie character arc ostensibly, with some ups and downs as they mentioned, but with that 5th movie, this is his identity
Sure.
unleashed. I can't wait to see that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I feel the transition here. I can feel them leading into that, and I think it really works.
But not in the same way that you feel the hard left turn of
exactly.
Ragnarok.
This
for
feels
sure.
natural, like
Yeah.
a natural extension of what Ragnarok set up, and then what will come next.
Yeah, I agree. I just like the idea, and I hope they keep. I believe her name is India Rose Hemsworth.
Yeah.
Around Chris Hemsworth's actual daughter.
Yeah.
I just think that's fun. Actually, all the like main actors and Taika Waititi's kids are in this movie as the kids in the
I'm sure
in the shadow cage or whatever. They helped design the shadow monsters as well, which I think is a cool thing.
They're based off of the drawings of the child.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, the last thing that we get is Jane Foster in Valhalla.
Yeah.
Which do we think that's gonna come back at all?
Maybe.
No, but it might, and it might be a problem. But also then like whatever that leads to might end up being cool. So like I don't really care. And like I don't know this storyline, but in the comics she dies after being Thor, and she's reborn as Valkyrie.
Mhm.
So this might be a fucking long con setup of what her character is going to be. But also,
Yeah.
it might not. She might be in Valhalla. You know, there might be a scene where Thor like almost dies, and he's in Valhalla, and Heimdall and Sif's hand, and his mom and father and brother are
Yeah.
there, and they're like, "No, you can do this." In
Yeah.
the last scene of the next one,
Sure.
and like that might be the extent of it, but also it might be something else. And I'm on board either way.
Sure. Yep. I agree.
I don't think it's enough. We don't have enough data points. We don't
Okay,
really know. So I think it's
alright,
gonna be the same.
alright.
Whatever.
Well, folks, I think that leads us right into giving this film a classic UMP score, and we'll be right back after this. Okay, after some litigation here, we have landed on a score, so why don't we run down the line here? Abram, Tucker, why don't you read out your guys' scores here?
I gave it a 6.4.
Oh, okay.
I gave this. I was gonna say heck and chonker, but let's avoid that.
A humdinger in many
This
ways.
humdinger of a film, a 8.7.
Okay. I gave it an 8.5. That lands it at an average of 7.9. But we do have a tie to litigate here.
Yep.
And that is between the other most recent MCU film, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Yep.
So what a quirky little quinky dink this is.
Yep.
Now, we're just going to do this. We'll do a simple hand vote, and we have to, well, we have an odd number here, so we won't really have to do this.
Right.
If you think this film should go above, if you think Thor: Love and Thunder should go above Doctor Strange, raise your hand.
A 5.
You don't?
No, I like Doctor Strange better than Thor.
That's what I want. That's what I agree.
I said put Thor: Love and Thunder.
Motherfucker.
We'll do a simple hand vote here.
Okay.
Here we go. We'll do a simple hand vote. If you think Thor: Love and Thunder should go above Doctor Strange, raise your hand. Okay.
This is the exact same thing he said before.
Look at him. He's throwing toot over here, this guy. This guy's throwing toot over here. That means that Thor: Love and Thunder will be going at place number 13 in our ranking here.
That's still
12.
not right. It's 12.
12, fuck. That means that Thor: Love and Thunder will be going at place number 12 in our MCU ranking, above Age of Ultron and below Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
It's fucked up. Can't do this.
Sorry, Tucker.
God, one of my new favorite MCU movies versus one of my least favorite.
Okay, alright, well, get fucked. How about that? But in many ways, aren't we all getting fucked here? No, yeah.
Actually, no ways whatsoever.
You will not be invited to the orgy.
Oh, nice one. Nice little Thor: Love and Thunder reference there, Tucker. Thank you so much for watching this review of Thor: Love and Thunder. Again, let us know your thoughts on the film in the comments or in the Discord. You can join that with the link in the description. We will be back with more UMP very soon. More in-person UMP.
More BS.
More BS. Not Morbius, but more...
Of us.
More of our BS.
We're doing
of
Miss
course.
Marvel next week. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, we're doing Miss Marvel
I've been
next
watching
week.
week to week. I'm ready.
Abrams is more caught up than anyone in the world, actually. And we'll also be doing Black Panther in person, I believe. So
Cool.
look forward to all of those things and
Yeah.
more. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. There he goes.